My name is Evelyn Reed, I'm 61, and I came home from a 40-year military career to find my only son dying while his wife partied on my dime. Before I tell you how I froze every cent she had and took back everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The hospital corridor was sterile and white, smelling of antiseptic and a quiet, profound grief that seemed to seep from the walls. I stood there, the doctor's words still ringing in my ears, a high-pitched sound that drowned out everything else. "We did everything we could, Colonel Reed. I'm so sorry. My son, my David, was gone." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. It felt like a block of ice. I scrolled to her name, Jessica. My daughter-in-law. My son's wife. My fingers fumbled as I hit the call button. It rang twice, then she picked up. The first thing I heard wasn't her voice. It was music. Loud thumping bass, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Felt like a physical blow. "Hello?" she finally said, her voice distant, annoyed. She had to shout over the noise. My own voice was a dry whisper. I could barely get the words out. "Jessica, it's David." "What about him?" she snapped. I took a shaky breath. The white walls of the hospital seemed to close in on me. He's gone, Jessica. David passed away." The music didn't stop. The laughter in the background didn't pause. There was a brief silence on her end, maybe 2 seconds. Then her voice, flat and cold, cut through the noise. "Oh, okay. I'm kind of busy right now. We'll talk later." Click. She hung up. Just like that. The line went dead, leaving me in the crushing silence of the hallway, the echo of her casual dismissal 1,000 times louder than the thumping music from her party. Did she just hang up on me? The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the polished linoleum floor. Just a few hours earlier, none of this was real. Just a few hours earlier, I was stepping off a plane at San Diego International Airport, the familiar California sun warming my face. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't Colonel Reed returning from a deployment. I was just Evelyn, a mother, coming home for good. The weight of my dress blues felt different today, not the burden of command, but the satisfying finality of a long career. My final mission was over. My life was my own again, and I was going to spend every second of it with my son. I decided not to tell David I was coming. I wanted to see the look on his face when I showed up at his front door, my duffel bag on the porch. I imagined his wide grin, the way his eyes would light up, the bare hug that would lift me off my feet. We'd sit at his kitchen table and talk for hours, catching up on everything I'd missed. "La Jolla, please," I told the taxi driver, giving him the address to the small house I'd helped David buy with my savings. It was supposed to be his fresh start, a place to build a life with Jessica. As the taxi wound its way along the coast, the Pacific Ocean sparkling to my left, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had served my country. I had sacrificed. But now it was all for this. For him. But when the taxi pulled up to his street, my stomach tightened into a knot. From a distance, something felt wrong. The lawn, which David always kept perfectly manicured, was overgrown with yellowing weeds. The paint on the porch was peeling. As I paid the driver and walked up the pathway, the feeling of unease grew into a cold dread. The mailbox was overflowing, stuffed with junk mail and what looked like bills, some of them stamped past due. A rolled-up newspaper, bleached by the sun, lay by the door. It was dated 2 weeks ago. My heart started to pound against my ribs. This wasn't right. David was meticulous. He would never let his home fall into this state. I pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed inside the silent house, but there was no answer. I knocked louder this time, my fist banging against the solid wood. Nothing. Just an unnerving, empty silence. It was the silence of a house that had been forgotten. It felt abandoned. Panic began to bubble up in my throat. I walked around the side of the house, peering into the grimy windows. The curtains were all drawn. It was impossible to see inside. What was going on? Where were they? I pulled out my phone to call David, but then I stopped. A familiar figure across the street caught my eye. It was Mrs. Gable, their elderly neighbor, watering her prize-winning roses. She'd lived here for 50 years and she saw everything. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise as she recognized me. Then, her expression shifted to one of pity. A deep, sorrowful pity that made my blood run cold. I called out her name, my voice cracking. "Mrs. Gable?" I had no idea the words she was about to say would shatter my world completely. She saw me from across the street, her hand holding the green watering hose frozen in midair. I crossed the asphalt, the heat of the day radiating up through the soles of my boots. "Mrs. Gable?" I asked again, my voice feeling thin in the open air. "Evelyn, my dear lord, it's you," she said, setting the hose down. Her face, a roadmap of friendly wrinkles, was etched with a deep, sorrowful concern. I didn't know you were coming." Nobody said anything. "I wanted to surprise them," I said, gesturing vaguely at the silent house. "Where are they, do you know? Is everything all right?" She wrung her hands, a gesture so full of worry that it sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. "Oh, Evelyn. You poor dear, you don't know." She took a step closer, lowering her voice as if the empty houses were listening. "They took David away in an ambulance. About 2 weeks ago now. It was late at night, lights flashing and everything. It was awful. The world tilted on its axis." "Ambulance? What happened? Is he okay?" Mrs. Gable shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't know, honey. I haven't seen him since. But her." She said the word "her" like it was something foul-tasting. "Jessica. She left the next morning. Packed a big suitcase. I thought she was going to the hospital, of course. But my granddaughter, you know how they are with their phones, she showed me something." She fumbled in her apron pocket and pulled out her smartphone. Her fingers, swollen with arthritis, tapped clumsily at the screen for a moment before she held it out to me. "Look at this," she whispered. I took the phone. It was open to Instagram. Jessica's profile. And there she was. The picture was bright and garish. Jessica, in a tiny bikini, was laughing on the deck of a massive gleaming white yacht. She was holding a champagne flute, her head thrown back, surrounded by a crowd of smiling suntanned people. The caption read, "Living my best life in the Keys. #yachtlife #Florida vibes." The post was from yesterday. I scrolled. Another picture. Jessica posing with an expensive-looking handbag, the ocean a brilliant blue behind her. Another. A video of them all doing shots, music blaring. It went on and on. A highlight reel of a luxury vacation happening right now while my son was taken away in an ambulance. I handed the phone back to her, my own hands feeling disconnected from my body. "She's in Florida?" I asked, the words tasting like ash. "That's what it says," Mrs. Gable confirmed, her voice laced with disgust. "And Evelyn, there's more. For months now, when David was away on what he told me were work trips, she'd have these parties. Loud music all night. Cars I've never seen coming and going at all hours. It never felt right." The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture so ugly I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't look away either. The neglected house. The late-night parties. And now this joyful vacation while her husband was God knows where, in God knows what condition. "Which hospital, Mrs. Gable?" I asked, my voice now devoid of all emotion. It was flat, cold, the voice of a commander assessing a threat. "Do you know which hospital they took him to?" "Scripps Memorial," she said without hesitation. "I saw it on the side of the ambulance." I thanked her, my mind already racing. I turned from the sad, silent house and walked back to the curb, my military posture the only thing holding me together. I flagged down the first taxi I saw, its yellow paint a blur in my vision. "Scripps Memorial Hospital," I ordered, my voice sharp. "And hurry." As the taxi sped away, I stared out the window, but I didn't see the palm trees or the sunny San Diego streets. I saw Jessica's laughing face on that yacht. I saw my son's empty home. I prayed for a miracle, for some simple explanation that would make this all make sense. But I had no idea I was driving toward an ending. A final brutal ending. The hospital was a maze of beige corridors and the persistent, clean smell of bleach. I found the intensive care unit on the 4th floor. The air here was different, hushed, heavy. The only sounds were the soft beeps and whirs of machines keeping people alive. I gave the nurse at the station David's name, and she pointed me toward a room at the end of the hall. Room 412. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, and my world ended. The man in the bed was a stranger. A stranger in my son's bed. His face was gaunt, his skin a waxy pale color stretched tight over his bones. His once thick brown hair was thin and patchy. He was hooked up to a half-dozen machines, a ventilator mask covering his nose and mouth. The rhythmic hiss of the ventilator was the only sign of life. I would have walked right past the room if it wasn't for his hand, lying on top of the thin white blanket. I recognized the small crescent-shaped scar on his knuckle from when he'd fallen off his bike at age 10. It was him. It was my David. A doctor in a white coat was looking at a chart in the corner. He looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm his mother," I managed to say, the words catching in my throat. "I'm Evelyn Reed. What's happened to my son?" The doctor's expression softened with professional sympathy. He introduced himself and led me a few feet away from the bed. "Colonel Reed, your son was admitted 2 weeks ago with severe abdominal pain. I'm afraid the news is not good. He has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's very advanced. It has spread to his liver and lungs. Stage 4. Cancer." The words didn't compute. David was 35. He was healthy. He ran marathons. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. There must be a mistake." "I'm so sorry," the doctor said, and I could see he meant it. "We've been trying to manage his pain, but his condition is deteriorating rapidly. If he had been brought in even a few months earlier, we might have had some treatment options, a chance to extend his life. But by the time he arrived, it was already too late." He paused, his gaze turning to David. "We tried to contact his emergency contact, a Jessica Reed, multiple times. We left voicemails, texts. No one ever responded. No one has come to visit him. No one has come to visit him." The doctor's words were a knife in my gut. She had left him here, to die alone, while she partied in the sun. The rage was so sudden and so total it almost choked me. I stumbled over to the bed, my legs shaking. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold. So cold. His skin felt like paper. "David," I whispered, leaning close. "It's Mom. I'm here, baby. I'm home." As if from a great distance, his eyelids fluttered. He slowly opened his eyes. They were clouded with pain and medication, but he saw me. A flicker of recognition. A ghost of a smile touched his cracked lips. His fingers tightened ever so slightly around mine. He tried to speak through the ventilator mask, his voice a faint, raspy breath. "Mom," he breathed. "I love you." And then it happened. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor beside his bed suddenly changed. It became one long, continuous, high-pitched tone. A flat line. Nurses rushed in. The doctor shouted orders. Someone was gently but firmly pulling me away from the bed. "Ma'am, you need to step outside." I was pushed out into the hallway, the door closing in my face. I could hear them working, the frantic sounds of a code team trying to bring him back. I stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door, repeating the word no over and over again like a prayer. But prayers don't always work. A few minutes later the door opened. The doctor emerged, pulling off his gloves. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. He looked at me, his face grim, and he slowly shook his head. That's when I called her. Standing in that hallway, with the sound of the flatline still screaming in my ears, I called Jessica. And she told me she was busy. She told me we'd talk later. And she hung up on her dying husband's mother. In the silence of that room, my grief began to crystallize into something else. Something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage. I don't remember much about the next hour. It was a blur of signing papers, of nurses speaking in soft, sympathetic tones that I couldn't process. They gave me a clear plastic bag with David's personal effects. I walked out of the hospital into the blinding afternoon sun like a zombie. I found a bench and sat down, the plastic bag crinkling in my lap. For the first time I looked inside. His watch. The one I gave him for his college graduation. His worn leather wallet. And his phone. My hands were trembling as I took out the wallet. I opened it, half expecting to see pictures, cards, the normal clutter of a life. It was empty. Completely empty. Except for his driver's license. No cash. No credit cards. Nothing. It was like he had been wiped clean. Then I picked up his phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. David and I were close. I knew his passcode. It was the year I was born. I swiped it open, my thumb hovering over his text messages. I had to know. I had to understand how it came to this. I scrolled back, my eyes scanning dates. 3 weeks ago. A thread with Jessica. My breath caught in my chest. I opened it. The messages were there, laid out in cold, hard text. A timeline of his last conscious days. David, Jess, the pain is getting worse. I can't keep anything down. I think we need to go to the hospital. Jessica, you're always so dramatic. It's a stomach bug. Take some Pepto. David, this isn't a bug. It's different. I'm scared. Jessica, well, I can't deal with this right now. The girls are counting on me for this Florida trip. It's been planned for months. I can't just cancel. David, please. Don't go. I need you. Jessica, I'll be back in a week. You'll be fine. Stop being a baby. The last message from him was 3 days later. A single desperate text. David, Jess, I'm in so much pain. I think it's serious. We need to go to the ER. Her reply, sent an hour later, was the final nail in the coffin. Jessica, stop being so dramatic, David. It's just a stomach bug. I have a trip with the girls I can't cancel. She knew. He told her he was in agony. He begged her for help. And she called him a baby, told him he was being dramatic, and left him to go party in Florida. She didn't just abandon him. She dismissed him. She belittled his pain while he was dying. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. It wasn't grief anymore. It was a cold, methodical fury. The kind I hadn't felt since I was a young lieutenant leading my first platoon into a hostile situation. This was no longer just a tragedy. This was a crime. Maybe not in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of a mother. I stood up from the bench, my purpose clear. I knew what I had to do. I needed to go back to that house. His house. The place where he had been so carelessly discarded. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a crime scene. And I was going to find every last piece of evidence of her betrayal. I got into another taxi, the plastic bag with David's things clutched in my hand like a weapon. The driver asked me where I was going. Take me back to La Jolla, I said, my voice steady now. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, probably saw the look in my eyes. He didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. The text messages were the first piece of the puzzle. I knew I had to get back into that house, because I had a sickening feeling that the truth of what Jessica had done was far worse than just a few callous text messages. And I was right. I used the spare key David had given me years ago, the one I kept on my military dog tags. The lock turned with a rusty click, and the door swung open into the stale, stuffy air of the house. The place was a disaster. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, empty takeout containers littered the coffee table, and a thin layer of dust covered every surface. It smelled like neglect. I walked straight to David's small home office in the corner of the living room. His desk was a mess of scattered papers. I started sorting through them, my movements precise and efficient. And then I found it. A thick manila folder labeled bank statements. My hands were steady as I opened it. Inside were the last 3 months of statements for their joint checking account and credit cards. I sat down in David's desk chair and began to read. The first statement from 3 months ago looked normal. Mortgage payments, groceries, utility bills. But then 2 months ago the pattern changed. Small charges at first. $100 at a high-end salon. $200 at a boutique. Then the charges got bigger. And more frequent. The statement for the last month was where the horror truly began. The dates corresponded exactly with the time David was getting sicker, with the time he was lying alone in that hospital bed. I spread the papers out on the desk, a paper trail of her monstrous selfishness. There it was, in black and white. A charge for $15,000 to Keys Luxury Yacht Charters. Dated the day after David was admitted to the hospital. My breath hitched. I kept reading. A charge for $8,000 at a Chanel boutique in Miami. Another for $5,000 at a Neiman Marcus. Round trip, first-class airline tickets to Florida. $2,500. Hotel suites, expensive dinners, spa treatments. It was all there. A lavish, no expenses spared vacation. She hadn't just gone on a trip with the girls. She had gone on a wild spending spree. And she had used their money to do it. My money. The money from my military salary, the savings I had carefully put into a trust for David, the inheritance he was supposed to have for his future. She was spending his inheritance while he was dying. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the sides of the desk. It wasn't just the spending. It was the cruelty of it. The timing. The absolute sociopathic lack of empathy. Then, buried under the bank statements, I found something else. A small leather-bound notebook. It was David's. I recognized his neat, blocky handwriting immediately. I opened it. It was a ledger. A log of cash withdrawals he had made. Next to each entry, he had written a short note. March 15, $2,000. Jessica said her mom needed emergency dental surgery. April 2nd, $5,000. For new roof repairs. Jessica said the contractor needed cash. April 20th, $3,000. For Jessica's car trouble. I flipped back to the bank statements. On March 16th, there was a charge for $1,950 at a high-end spa in Beverly Hills. On April 3rd, a charge for $4,800 at a designer furniture store. Her car trouble on April 20th coincided with a weekend trip to Las Vegas with her friends. She hadn't just been spending their joint money. She had been actively lying to him, manipulating her sick husband into giving her cash for fake emergencies, then using that money to fund her lifestyle. He trusted her. He believed her. He probably felt guilty that he was sick and couldn't provide for her manufactured crises. I closed the notebook. I had everything I needed. This wasn't just callousness. This wasn't just neglect. This was a calculated, systematic campaign of fraud and abuse against a dying man. I took out my phone and began taking pictures of every single receipt, every statement, every page of David's heartbreaking ledger. Each click of the camera shutter felt like loading a round into a magazine. The investigation was over. It was time to go on the offensive. My first call was to a man I trusted more than almost anyone on the planet. Retired Command Sergeant Major Frank Miller. We'd served together in Iraq. He was a bulldog, a man who knew how to get things done, and now he held a senior civilian position in the Financial Administration Office at the Pentagon. "Evelyn," his gruff voice answered. "Good to hear you're back on solid ground. How's the retirement treating you?" There was no time for pleasantries. "Frank, I'm in trouble." "It's David." My voice was tight, controlled. I laid out the situation for him in concise, military-style bullet points. The hospital, the cancer, the abandonment, the spending spree, the fraud. I didn't let any emotion bleed into my voice. I just stated the facts. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Frank finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. That creature," he growled. "Evelyn, what do you need?" "David signed a durable power of attorney over to me before my last deployment, Frank. It's ironclad, notarized by a JAG officer. It gives me complete control over his finances in case of incapacitation or death. I need to invoke it. Now. Send it to me," he said. "Secure email. I'll handle it." I immediately scanned and sent him the document. Frank worked fast. He was a man who knew how to cut through red tape. He made calls to the bank's military liaison office, a department most civilians don't even know exists. He cited military codes and federal statutes regarding the financial protection of service members and their families. He was relentless. Less than an hour later, he called me back. "It's done," he said. "Their joint accounts are frozen. All credit cards linked to David's name have been canceled. The remaining balance, and from what I saw, she left a surprising amount, has been transferred to a new account under your sole control. She's cut off. Completely." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made my knees buckle. It wasn't about the money. It was about taking back control. It was about stopping her. "Thank you, Frank," I whispered. "Don't thank me," he said. "Get justice for your boy." I hung up. For a moment there was silence. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a fraud alert from the credit card company. "Your card has been declined at the Gucci store in Miami, Florida. Was this a legitimate transaction?" I almost laughed. I texted back a single word, "No." Then my phone began to blow up. It was Jessica. The first call went to voicemail. The second. The third. Then the texts started flooding in. A rapid-fire barrage of anger and confusion. "Jessica. What is going on? My card was just declined." "Jessica. Is this some kind of sick joke, Evelyn? Jessica. Pick up your phone. I'm in the middle of something important. Jessica. I swear if you did something to my money, you will regret this. My money, she called it. Not our money. My money. The entitlement was breathtaking. I watched the messages pour in, my face a mask of stone. Then, after about 10 minutes of furious texts, her tone changed. The anger gave way to a dawning panic. Jessica. Evelyn, please answer. I think there's been a mistake. Jessica. Okay, look, maybe I should have stayed. I'm sorry. Can we just talk about this? Jessica. Evelyn, please, we can talk about this. I'm in a tough spot. I needed the money. She was sorry? She needed the money? Not once did she mention David. Not once did she ask how he was before he passed. Not once did she offer a word of condolence. It was all about her and her access to the cash flow I had just severed. I put the phone down on the dusty coffee table. I let it buzz and vibrate, a testament to her unraveling. This was just the first step. I had cut off her supply line. Now it was time to plan the main assault. The battle had just begun, and I was not going to lose. It took her 2 days to get back to San Diego. I spent that time methodically cleaning David's house, erasing the filth of her neglect, boxing up his personal things, and preparing for her arrival. I also called a locksmith and had every single lock on the house changed. She must have taken a red-eye flight, because she showed up at 8 a.m. on the second day. I heard her car screech to a halt outside. A moment later, I heard the sound of her key scratching uselessly against the new lock in the front door. Then came the banging. Loud, furious pounding that rattled the entire door frame. Evelyn. I know you're in there. Open this damn door. She shrieked. I took a deep, steadying breath, walked to the door and opened it. I didn't open it all the way. I just opened it enough to block the entrance with my body. She stood there on the porch looking haggard and furious. Her expensive tan was already starting to fade, and her eyes were puffy, not from grief, but from rage and lack of sleep. She was wearing designer yoga pants and a sweatshirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. What did you do? She hissed, trying to push past me. I didn't budge. After 40 years in the army, I could stand my ground. This is my son's house, Jessica, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You are no longer welcome here. Her face contorted into a mask of disbelief, then fury. Your son's house? This is my house too. We were married. You can't just lock me out. And you can't just steal my money. It wasn't your money, I stated, my voice like ice. It was David's inheritance. An inheritance you were spending while he was lying in a hospital bed, alone, because you were too busy buying handbags. The direct hit landed. She flinched, a flicker of something, maybe shame, maybe just surprise at being caught, flashed in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a venomous glare. She decided to go on the attack. Oh, don't you dare play the grieving mother with me, she sneered, her voice rising. Where were you for the last 20 years, huh? Off playing soldier in some desert somewhere while I was here. I was the one who had to deal with him day in and day out. I was the one who took care of him. That was it. The dam of my composure broke. Took care of him? I repeated, my voice low and trembling with a rage I could barely contain. You call leaving him to die alone taking care of him? He begged you to take him to the hospital and you went to Florida. He is dead because of you, Jessica. The accusation hung in the air between us. She saw she was losing, so she changed tactics. Her face crumpled, and she began to produce huge theatrical sobs. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. You don't understand, she wailed, loud enough for Mrs. Gable across the street to come out onto her porch. I'm the victim here. He was sick for so long. I was under so much stress. And now his cruel, cold-hearted mother comes back and throws me out on the street. I have nothing. I've lost my husband. She was putting on a show for the neighbors, painting me as the villain, the evil mother-in-law. I just stared at her, my expression unreadable. I watched her performance, the fake tears, the heaving shoulders. She was good. I had to give her that. But I wasn't an audience she could fool. I let her cry for another moment. Then I spoke, my voice cutting through her sobs like a razor. Save it for the judge, Jessica. Then I closed the door in her face. the sound of the new deadbolt sliding home echoing with a satisfying finality. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding. I knew this was far from over. This was just a skirmish. But as I stood there, listening to her eventually give up and storm away, I had no idea just how dirty she was willing to play. I thought I had her cornered. I was wrong. The next phase of her attack came 3 days later. It was Frank who alerted me. His voice was grim over the phone. "Evelyn, you need to see this." He sent me a link. It was to a GoFundMe page. The title read, "Help a grieving widow fight her cruel military mother-in-law." My blood ran cold. I clicked the link. The page featured a large, professionally taken photo of Jessica and David from their wedding day. They looked happy, in love. Below it, Jessica had written a long, rambling sob story, a masterpiece of manipulation and lies. She wrote about her deep and profound love for David. She described, in excruciatingly fake detail, her heartbreak and devastation. And then she got to the villain of her story, me. "Just as I was trying to process the loss of my soulmate," she wrote, "his estranged mother, a high-ranking Army colonel named Evelyn Reed, returned after a lifetime of absence. Instead of offering comfort, she used her power and influence to seize control. She locked me out of our home, froze our bank accounts, and has left me a grieving widow with absolutely nothing. I am now homeless and penniless, all because of a cold, heartless woman who was never a real mother to him. Please, any amount you can donate will help me hire a lawyer to fight for what is rightfully mine and honor my husband's memory." I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. She had twisted the narrative completely. She painted herself as the loving wife, the victim, and me as the monster. The page had been up for less than 48 hours, and it had already raised over $5,000. The comments section was a sewer of vitriol, all aimed at me. "This Evelyn Reed sounds like a horrible person. Stay strong, Jessica. How can a mother be so cruel? I'm so sorry for your loss. Disgusting behavior from someone in our military. I've donated. Hope you get a good lawyer and take her for everything she's worth." Each comment was a fresh stab in the gut. These people, these complete strangers, believed her. They were sending money to the woman who let my son die. She wasn't just trying to get money. She was trying to destroy my reputation, my honor, the very foundation of who I was. For 40 years, my name and my rank had been synonymous with integrity. In 2 days, she had turned me into a public villain. The phone started ringing. It was a cousin from back east. "Evelyn? I saw something on Facebook. Is it true what they're saying about you and David's wife?" The shame and rage were suffocating. She had taken the battle public, using social media as her weapon. It was a brilliant, despicable move. She knew a direct confrontation with me was a losing proposition, so she had turned to the court of public opinion, where facts didn't matter as much as a good story. And she had crafted a hell of a story. I felt isolated, cornered. For a moment, the sheer audacity of her attack almost broke me. She was using my life of service against me, painting my dedication to my country as maternal neglect. She was using their wedding photo, a memory I had cherished, as a prop in her disgusting play. I sat there in David's quiet house, the glow of the screen illuminating the hateful words. She thought she could intimidate me, shame me into backing down. She thought she could win by turning the world against me. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had mistaken my grief for weakness. Now, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to dismantle her piece by piece. It was time to call a lawyer. Frank gave me the name of the best lawyer in San Diego for cases like this, Mark Peterson. He was a former Marine JAG officer, a bulldog in a courtroom who specialized in complex family law and financial abuse cases. I met him at his downtown office the next day. It was clean, organized, and efficient, just like the man himself. Mark was in his late 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't get emotional. I laid out my case with the same precision I would use to brief a commanding officer. I gave him everything: the bank statements, the credit card bills, David's ledger, the text messages from David's phone, and finally a printout of the GoFundMe campaign. I laid the papers on his polished mahogany desk. The stack was thick. He listened intently, not interrupting once. He read through every document, his expression growing grimmer with each page. He lingered on the text messages between David and Jessica, Then on her vacation photos, his jaw tightening. When he finished, he looked up at me, and for the first time I saw a flash of cold anger in his professional eyes. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and firm, "I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen greed. I've seen cruelty. This is one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse, neglect, and malicious intent I have ever seen." He tapped the GoFundMe printout with his finger. "And this is defamation. Pure and simple." He leaned forward. "We will not just defend against any claim she might make. We will attack. We're going to file a petition to have you named the sole administrator of David's estate. We'll file for a restraining order to keep her away from the house and from you. And we are going to sue her for every penny she raised on that fraudulent page, plus damages for defamation of character." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I had an ally, a professional. "What will she do?" I asked. "She'll fight," Mark said. "She'll get a lawyer who will try to paint you as the villain, just like she did online. But they don't have facts. We do." He was right. 2 weeks later, after we filed our initial petitions, I received a letter from Jessica's newly hired lawyer. It wasn't a response to our lawsuit. It was a settlement offer. I read it, my hands shaking with fury. They were proposing that we split David's estate 50-50. In exchange, Jessica would agree to take down the GoFundMe page, and they would both walk away and avoid a messy public trial. But it was the last paragraph that made me see red. Furthermore, her lawyer wrote, "We are prepared to argue in court that Colonel Reed's decades-long absences constituted a form of parental abandonment, causing significant psychological trauma to Mr. Reed. Jessica, as his devoted wife, provided the emotional support his mother failed to give, and as such, she is entitled to significant compensation for her caregiving and her own emotional distress. They were going to use my service to my country, the very thing that paid for the roof over their heads and the money in their bank account, and twist it into an accusation of abandonment. They were threatening to put my entire life, my relationship with my son, on trial. They thought they could scare me. They thought I would buckle to protect my reputation." I picked up the phone and called Mark. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Tell them no deal. Tell them I will see them in court." I tore the settlement letter into tiny pieces and threw it in the trash. There would be no settlement. There would be no negotiation. This was no longer about the inheritance or the money. This was about my son's memory. It was about my honor. She wanted a war? She was about to get one with a 4-star general. The morning of the hearing, I put on my uniform. The full dress blues, the one reserved for the most formal of occasions. I polished the eagle insignia on my shoulders until it gleamed. I pinned on every medal, every ribbon I had ever earned over 40 years of service. Each one represented a tour of duty, a sacrifice, a piece of my life given to my country. Today they were my armor. When I walked into the courtroom, the room fell silent for a moment. Mark Peterson stood up and gave me a grim, respectful nod. Across the aisle, Jessica sat with her lawyer. She was dressed head to toe in black, a designer dress that was meant to look like morning attire but just looked expensive. She had a lace handkerchief in her hand and her face was arranged in a mask of sorrow. She wouldn't look at me. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Judge Miller, called the court to order. Jessica's lawyer went first, spinning his tale of the poor, grieving widow being bullied by her powerful absentee mother-in-law. He talked about Jessica's unwavering devotion to David. I just sat there, my back ramrod straight, and listened to his lies. Then it was Mark's turn. He didn't start with insults or accusations. He started with facts. He calmly and methodically presented the evidence, projecting it onto a large screen for the whole court to see. First, the bank statements. Huge red circles highlighted the charges from Chanel, from the yacht charter company, from the 5-star hotels in Florida. Next to them, he displayed the timeline of David's hospitalization. The dates lined up perfectly. Then he put up the text messages. The judge leaned forward, reading David's desperate pleas for help and Jessica's cold, dismissive replies. A murmur went through the courtroom. He called his first witness, Dr. Adams, the physician who had treated David in the ICU. Mark asked him one simple question. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, if Mr. Reed had received medical attention when he first reported severe symptoms, what would his prognosis have been?" The doctor's answer was clear and devastating. He would have had a chance. With treatment, he could have lived another 1, perhaps 2 years. But by the time he was admitted, the cancer was so advanced there was nothing we could do. Jessica's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. The damage was done. Finally, Mark called me to the stand. I walked past Jessica, my metals clinking softly. I could feel her hatred like a physical force. Mark asked me about my career, my relationship with my son. Then he looked at me with compassion. "Colonel Reed, what is it you want from this court?" I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at the judge. I turned in my chair and looked directly at Jessica. For the first time, she was forced to meet my gaze. My voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent courtroom. "They asked me to settle," I began. "They offered me money to make this go away. But this was never about the inheritance. I would give every penny I have, and everything my son had, just to have 5 more minutes with him." Tears I didn't know I had pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. "You want to talk about abandonment, Jessica? You abandoned him when he was sick. You abandoned him when he was scared. You abandoned him when he was dying. I sent money home to ensure he was cared for, to give him a good life. But I couldn't protect him from the enemy sleeping in his own bed." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, she didn't just take his money. She took his time. She took his dignity. She took his chance to die with a loved one holding his hand. I want justice for that." I finished. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Jessica's lawyer had nothing to say. The judge looked down at the pile of evidence, then at Jessica, then at me. Her face was like stone. She didn't need to deliberate. "This court finds in favor of the petitioner, Evelyn Reed," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "Colonel Reed is granted sole administration of the estate of David Reed. All assets are to be transferred to her control immediately. Miss Jessica Reed is hereby ordered to have no contact with Colonel Reed, and is barred from the property at 123 Ocean View Lane. Furthermore, this court will be referring the matter of the GoFundMe campaign to the District Attorney's Office for an investigation into potential fraud." She looked directly at Jessica. "This hearing is concluded." The gavel came down with a sharp final crack. It was over. Jessica shot up from her chair, her mask of grief replaced by pure ugly rage. "You'll regret this, you old hag," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. 2 bailiffs moved in quickly and escorted her, still screaming, from the courtroom. I just sat there as they took her away. I had won, but it felt like a hollow victory. Justice had been served, but it wouldn't bring my son back. As I walked out of the courthouse, back into the bright California sun, I felt a profound emptiness. I had won the war, but what was I supposed to do with the peace? In the weeks following the trial, the silence in David's house was deafening. I had won. I had secured his estate, and Jessica was out of my life for good. The district attorney was indeed pursuing fraud charges against her, but the victory felt empty. I would wander through the rooms of the house, looking at his pictures, touching his things, and the grief would wash over me in waves. I had completed my final mission, but I had no new orders. I was adrift. I knew I couldn't let my son's legacy be just about a bitter court battle. His life had to mean more than that. The money in the bank account, the money Jessica had been so desperate to get her hands on, felt tainted. I decided to clean it, to turn it into something good. I used a significant portion of the estate, along with my own life savings, to establish a foundation. I called it David's Light. Its mission was simple: to provide financial assistance and support services to the families of active-duty military personnel and veterans who were battling critical illnesses. It was for the people like David, whose loved ones might be deployed overseas, unable to be by their side. It was the support system I wished he'd had. I threw myself into the work. It was a new kind of mission, one fought not with strategy and tactics, but with paperwork and empathy. One of our first partnerships was with Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. We funded a new program to provide housing and transportation for military families who had to travel for their child's cancer treatment. One afternoon, I was at the hospital for a meeting, walking through the oncology ward. The sights and sounds were all too familiar. The beeping machines, the smell of disinfectant, the quiet bravery on the faces of sick children. As I passed one room, I glanced inside. There was a little boy, sitting alone on his bed, curled up in a ball. He was tiny for his age, with big sad brown eyes and almost no hair. He was clutching a worn, scruffy teddy bear as if it were a life raft. The head nurse, a kind woman named Maria, saw me looking. "That's Leo," she said softly. "He's 8. Leukemia. He's a ward of the state. His parents, well, they couldn't handle it. They surrendered their parental rights a few months ago. He's been here by himself ever since." By himself. The word struck me like a physical blow. Just like David. My heart ached with a pain that was both old and new. I looked at this small, forgotten child and I saw my own son. Can I go in?" I asked. Maria nodded. I walked into the room. The little boy looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Hi there," I said gently. "My name is Evelyn. That's a very handsome bear you have." He hugged the bear tighter. "His name is Captain Patches," he whispered. I pulled up a chair and sat with him. I didn't ask about his illness. I asked him about Captain Patches. I asked him what his favorite superhero was. We talked for an hour. When I left, he gave me a tiny, hesitant wave. I came back the next day. And the day after that. I brought him comic books and sugar-free pudding cups. I read to him from The Hobbit. I learned that he was smart and funny, and that he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He slowly started to open up, to smile a little more. He started to wait for me by the window each afternoon. One day I was getting ready to leave. I had just finished reading a chapter about Bilbo Baggins meeting the dragon Smaug. Leo was quiet for a long time. I thought he had fallen asleep. But then he reached out his small, frail hand and took mine. He looked up at me, his big brown eyes serious and full of a question that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "Can you?" he started, his voice barely a whisper. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Can you be my grandma?" The question hit me with the force of a tidal wave. It knocked the air out of my lungs and cracked open the armor I had built around my heart. I looked at this brave little boy, so alone in the world, and I felt a surge of love so fierce it was breathtaking. Tears streamed down my face, the first real, cleansing tears I had cried since David died. I leaned forward and hugged him, Captain Patches squished between us. "Yes, Leo," I sobbed into his thin hair. "Yes, I can." It took 6 long, grueling months. Months of chemotherapy for Leo, and months of legal paperwork for me. But David's light covered every penny of his medical bills, getting him the best treatment available. And I navigated the complex bureaucratic maze of the foster care and adoption system with the same determination I once used to plan military campaigns. The day the judge signed the final adoption papers was the second best day of my life. The best was the day, 2 weeks later, when the doctors declared Leo in remission. I drove him home from the hospital in David's old pickup truck. He was still thin, and his hair was just beginning to grow back in soft, downy tufts, but his eyes were bright with a light I had never seen before. He was finally free. As we pulled into the driveway of the house, our house, he looked at it with awe. "Is this where we live now, Grandma?" he asked. "This is it, sweetie," I said, my heart full. "Welcome home." The house was different now. I had kept David's office as it was, a quiet memorial to him, with his books and photos. But the rest of the house I had transformed. I'd painted the living room a warm sandy color. I planted bright pink bougainvillea that now climbed the trellis on the porch. The backyard had a new swing set and a small vegetable garden. It was no longer a place of grief. It was a place of life. On the mantelpiece, next to a framed photo of David in his army uniform, I placed a new picture. Me and Leo on the beach, laughing as a wave chased us up the sand. That first night I made tacos his favorite. As we sat at the kitchen table, Leo looked over at the photo of David. "Would Uncle David have liked me?" he asked quietly. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "He would have loved you, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He would be so proud of you." Life found a new rhythm. We spent our mornings in the garden, our afternoons doing his homework, our evenings reading on the porch swing. I continued to run David's Light, which had now grown, helping dozens of families across the country. Sometimes Leo would come with me to volunteer, handing out care packages with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. I even started kayaking again, joining a club for seniors at the local marina. Some mornings Leo would sit on the pier, cheering me on, his small voice carrying across the water. The pain of losing David never truly went away. It became a part of me, a quiet ache in my heart that I carried every day. But it was no longer a crushing weight. It was a reminder of a love that was, and a reminder of the love that still is. One afternoon I was sitting on the porch, holding the old pocket watch my father had given me, the one David used to love to play with. Leo ran out of the house, his face beaming. He was holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing he had made in school. It showed two figures, a tall woman in a military uniform with lots of medals, and a small boy holding a teddy bear. They were standing on a beach, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "It's us, Grandma," he said proudly. "This is our family." I pulled him into a hug, the drawing pressed between us. I looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue horizon. I had come home looking for the son I had lost, but instead, I had found the grandson I never knew I needed. The battle was over. The war was won. And for the first time in a very, very long time I was at peace. Thank you for staying with me and listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I believe in the power of speaking our truth. My question for you is, have you ever had to fight for what was right against someone who should have been on your side? How did you find the strength to do it? Please share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. Your experience could be the light that helps someone else find their way through the darkness. If my story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories from the heart.